Welcome back to the Places We'll Go show. Richie and I always very glad to have you with us, and we have brought along another stellar guest for you to listen to today. Welcome, Jon Marchant.
Awesome to be here. Thank you, Mark.
Well, it is fabulous to have you here, Jon. And for those who don't know you, I'll do a bit of a trail, but wonderful to have you with us. So Jon is Marketing Director at Moju, which I'm sure many of you will have seen is one of the leading ginger shots brands in the UK. Jon, very much a rising star, actually. A Marketing Academy scholar. In fact, was a Marketing Academy scholar of the same cohort as Richie some 8, 9, 10 years ago. Obviously, we always big up the Marketing Academy. But beyond that, has twice won the Grocer Gold Award, won an IPA Grand Prix, no less, and a Cannes Young Lion winner. So lots of accolades. Started with a degree in marketing, started agency side in his career at Mediacom, then moved client side, did only 3 years. Heineken 4 years, I think that's where you were, Jon, when Richie and you crossed paths, and then Simba for 3 years, and then moved to Moju, where you've had a lot of fun and a lot of success. Moju is on a mission to become the UK's favourite and freshest way to kickstart the day, and you very generously sent some samples, Jon, so I know it sort of kicks the arse out of the morning. And actually, Moju is very interesting. It's a rare breed of scale-up that's moved into brand building, and that's obviously not an easy gig for many brands and companies. How do you tip into mainstream media and really go harder above the line and at top of funnel? With the Channel 4 breakfast sponsorship, which I understand is going really well. So I think it's going to be a fascinating interview around fast-paced growth environments, how to make the case for brand when you don't have all the data and the econometrics, and also just generally, Jon, your perspectives as a rising star on the future of the marketing industry. So fabulous to have you with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, excited for this.
Oh, Jon, God, really, really cool. And I'm so glad we get to reconnect in this way. It's just fantastic. And look, we're filming in the morning. And, clearly that is your jam, the Ginger Shots brand that's trying to give us a kick as we start our days. So tell us a little bit more about Moju. What's going on in your world around that?
Yeah, so Moju is a functional juice shots brand, and we're famous for our ginger shot. I think we say that you never forget your first ginger shot, which I think Mark can probably attest to quite well. So it started about 8 years ago. So it's founded by Rich and Charlie, who were working in sort of city jobs, looking for alternatives to energy drinks and caffeine and really expensive smoothies that could help them power through the day but in a more natural, healthier way. So that was kind of the sort of inception of the company. And it started really in coffee shops, so independent coffee shops, through shots and also through juices and smoothies. But what was really interesting was it was the ginger shots and the turmeric shots that really caught people's eye and attention. And built a bit of a cult following. So then they started going into sort of festivals, and they would say it's waking up people from the dead after the sort of big nights out on a festival, and that was where again it built a bit of a cult following. And then over the years, it really was the shots over the juices that kind of caught people's attention and eye. And listings in Sainsbury's and Waitrose followed, where the rate of sale is phenomenally high. We had some shopper research where we were seeing people going in at 5, 6 in the morning, picking up whole cases and taking them to the office. So it really got that kind of following. And eventually, so I joined about 3.5 years ago now, where the brand was starting to build that kind of product market fit and starting to build that following. And the remit there was really to take it to the next level and take it to cross that chasm into that mainstream audience, where there was always a question mark: can ginger shots become mainstream? Because they could be seen by many, particularly obviously there's a lot of stuff that comes over from the US that can be seen. There's a little bit of a fad, but before joining the company, I was a fan of the products, and I felt there was something really kind of special and unique in it. It wasn't just about all the kind of consumer macro trends around health, convenience, naturality, but there was something special in the product experience that I thought was really sensorial and really emotional, which we could really take to consumers in a really fun and exciting way. So it felt like a really interesting product and brand, but a really interesting marketing opportunity. And so since then, we've been doing things like launching in a multi-serve dosing bottle. So that's 7 shots in one bottle, which has been a phenomenal success, and sort of taken out that, I'd say, more of that kind of Actimel coffee morning occasion where people want to have something that fires up their day, but in a sort of healthy way. And that's now sort of our dominant product and been a great success. And as Mark touched on, We started sponsoring the Channel 4 breakfast last year, and that's helped sort of solidify that routine and occasion really successfully. So yeah, been a wild ride, but the brand is doing really well. It's a category defining brand, so we're about 70-ish% market share, which is also a very interesting marketing challenge, because you're not only building the brand, but you're building the category at the same time. So yeah, that's just a little bit on Moju. We can obviously go into more detail on any of those elements, but that's it in a nutshell, I'd say.
What a great story, and already a phenomenal success, and the sky's the limit. I'm really interested. You talked about pace and energy. We'll come back to that, because I just want to pick up on that point about growing the category. It's an interesting point. It was a philosophy of Mars that we're not just after share. We want to grow the category. And actually, it was at a conference yesterday, Rise, around DEI. Shout out to Ali Hannon at Creative Equals, actually. Brilliant conference. And somebody from P&G was talking. Again, actually, that's fully embedded in their marketing thinking. We've got to grow the category. So I'm just going to push you on that a little bit. Well, how do you think about that problem or challenge or opportunity of growing the category?
Yeah, so I think that's something we've been very cognizant of, and the way we've approached it is actually there's an education job to do here on the product. So if we were going in a category, for example, oat milks, where Oatly had already built the category and we were another brand, it would all be about how do we make this brand stand out and make it differentiated to Oatly, but they'd done the job of the building the category. Whereas we've come in to kind of create the category, we've had to do that balance between educating people about the product whilst also building an iconic brand that is differentiated and unique, which means that when others enter the category, obviously there's a reason why they would stick with Moju. And I think that's been challenging, and I think we'd wanted to probably go straight into brand building and do a lot more of the emotional brand building stuff, but we've had to sort of tether ourselves a little bit to doing things in the right way, which has meant product first, product education first, and then as we kind of grow, bring in more of what the kind of the brand stands for and the meaning behind it, and the emotional element. But that's also been great because it's meant it's been really sustainable. So we started off deploying our budget in the most effective way possibly. So that would be things like sampling and proximity to stores, building that rate of sale up, then saying, look, our rate of sales improved. Can we get more stores? Yes, you can. So really effective and sustainable use of that investment. I think some categories where they've had huge sums of investment, but not necessarily the actual rate of sale to come through, is the flip side of what we've had. And some categories, maybe like alternative meats is a good example of that. Whereas we've built it really ground up, building that groundswell, being able to then build it in that way. So the category is built a loyal following with that early adopter, then it's kind of gone to that sort of early majority, and now we're going to that kind of later majority part as well. So I'd say we've built it in that sort of sustainable way, product first, and that's how we've kind of gone about it. And when I say product first, we've focused on the kind of when and why you take the product. So we have a strap line which is wake, shake, boom. You have it in the morning, you shake it because it's got raw ingredients in it, so it's fresh, and then boom, it makes you feel amazing. And obviously then trial at kind of point of purchase, so getting people to, because I said, like, once you try the product, I really establish what the category is all about. So yeah, that's the way we've approached it, I'd say.
I tell you, John, there's some really smart thinking there. And actually, when I listen to you, certainly in the introduction of the product and thereafter, the category building efforts you've made, there really is some real marketing science that goes into this, and go back to first principles of how you should, create a new category and then thereafter build up market share within it. I want to, in the vein of thinking about the role of educating us in terms of category building, I'd love to get your take on why things like, or ingredients like ginger and turmeric are a better alternative than perhaps our more traditional caffeine-based drinks that we would typically have in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing with something like ginger is it's been used for like thousands of years. So it feels novel, but actually it's the OG when it comes to powering up your day. And sometimes going back to those kind of going back to nature and going back to the originals is where we get where is the best way to go, rather than like creating stuff in a lab ultimately. And I think people are shifting back to that. But I mean, ginger is an all-rounder. Ultimately, it's great in terms of giving you, like, if you consume the product, you know that hit that you get from it. It gives you that's naturally invigorating and energizing just through the nature of the experience. But it's also, we've got loads of studies. We've worked with sports teams to look at things like immunity markers. It's also famous for things like inflammation and nausea. So it really is an all-rounder. I won't get too nerdy on it, but we've even done our own studies around. So the active compound in ginger is gingerol, and we've done research and and found that our ginger that we use, which is organic yellow Peruvian ginger, is 2.5 times more powerful, has 2.5 times more of that active compound than the market standard ginger, which is Chinese. But won't go into too much detail on that. But we do go into that rigor of really understanding, can we use the ingredients that will actually have that impact, rather than go to like what's the cheapest ingredient. Because when you're selling at a shop for £2, we've got to deliver on that experience. So we do get quite nerdy on it, but we don't necessarily talk about that too much.
I love that. Just as a follow-up, interestingly, I mean, all wives' tales and all that. I mean, turmeric, for instance. I mean, I'm from India, and actually, turmeric is used as one of the biggest healing properties of all. And every time you've got sore throats and colds and all sorts of things, it's always sort of gargling with turmeric. And turmeric's a staple part of the diet in India. In most curries and foods as well, for that healing sort of potential that it has. So it's a really powerful ingredients that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think on that, Richie, as well, there's a couple of things. I think most categories you operate in, they're not necessity products. Like if I can't get a sparkling water, I'll just have a water, right? We have a lot of people that say to us, if I don't have my morning Moju, I'm in serious trouble. We even had someone come to the office directly the other day because their delivery didn't come on time and they desperately needed the Moju. So they came, and luckily someone was in and could give them a little care package. But they travelled a good sort of 15 miles to come here and get them their morning shot. So we are actually like, there's not many categories, and probably ones I haven't operated in, where people say it's like that's a necessary part of their morning. And I think the turmeric side of things you touched on there, we do appeal to such a wide demographic, from ethnicity to age. We have 80, 90-year-olds consuming turmeric, and we have 18-year-olds taking a ginger shot for a hangover. So it's such a wide, varied group of people. We're not just after Gen Z, and we're not just after sort of, like females over 55. We have a really, really wide demographic, which I think is what's really exciting about the potential of the brand.
I love this. Power up your day to the extent that, it didn't sound like addiction, but it sounded like some form of dependency, but in a good way. I mean, what's really interesting about the story, and this is why we had you on, Jon, frankly, is that there's a lot of thoughtfulness that's gone into the construction of Moju, and then the pace and the energy and the momentum. But if we focus on the other reason we had you on the show, is because you. So let's go there a little bit more. So tell us some of the key moments, how you got started in marketing, some of the key moments that brought you from where you were to where you are.
Yeah, sure. So I've always had an interest in marketing, but not really known it was called marketing until obviously it got a bit later on in my journey. But I was always like drawing Nike shoes at home and like thinking, oh, this would be amazing as a job. And but then also was really interested in like the commercial side of things. I love like mini enterprise at school and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of knew I wanted to do marketing, and that led me to do a marketing degree. And we can maybe chat a bit about that later, but the whole concept of a marketing degree is quite an interesting one, because for me it was where I wanted to go. But then actually there's been, in my early career, people would question, why did I go to this university and do a marketing degree? Why did I not go to a red brick and do a classic degree? And I was like, well, I wanted to do marketing, so surely I did a marketing degree. But so I always knew that was the path I wanted to go on. And I started off in MediaCom, media agency, and I would say that's an amazing grounding for anyone who's looking to get started in marketing. I don't actually think you can probably beat working in a media agency, just on the basis is that it's very strategic, so you get quite a sort of strategic seat at the table. You're very consumer-centric. You need to understand consumer behaviour, audience behaviour. And it's very commercial because you need to understand how that media spend pays back on ROI. So actually, even though it's maybe not the most creative instinctively of roles in terms of people who obsess obviously over advertising and comms, I'd say it's really like the learning curve was extremely steep, and I felt really confident going into a career within the brand side after having that kind of knowledge behind me. And it kind of really only energized my passion for marketing in that. But I always knew I wanted to go into sort of the holistic brand management space and ultimately be a sort of marketing director or CMO sort of reason why. I mean, it's really cheesy, but I remember watching an episode of Friends, not that I'm a huge Friends fan, and Chandler got a job as an advertising exec in a shoe company. And I was just like, is that an actual job that you get to like make adverts and do this? And I was like, that sounds like the coolest job ever. If I'm going to be spending all my days and my time in work, I want to do something like that. And that kind of made me think. I remember that was before I obviously chose the marketing course. That sounds pretty nice as a job. That sounds really fun. So that was a big driver actually in terms of like finding something that played to my strengths, but also just seemed like it was potential to have a lot of fun and get creative.
The legacy of Chandler Bing lives on. Back to you, Richie.
Absolutely.
100%.
Quite unquote.
It's I love that thought when you just, as you finished off there, where you said, we spend so much time in the jobs that we do, and it's all in and around finding the sweet spot for you, that something that you can get really passionate about, something that you would really feel and that you enjoy. And I just wonder if and actually in some respects, as you described it, you decided to go right in there with a degree that you felt was the one that was most appropriate for you, as opposed to some other alternatives, more general alternatives, I assume. Why did you make that choice? And perhaps if there's other people at those similar moments in their careers or journeys, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I've got a couple of perspectives on it. I think probably I didn't necessarily get a great deal of advice when I was looking to go to university, and so my gut went with, well, I'm passionate about marketing, so I'll choose marketing. I won't really look at the universities, I'll just go for that. So I think I was driven more from my intuition than anything, rather than advice. And if I was to give sort of the same advice to somebody else, I would say, if you want to get into marketing and you want to get into business, you just need to think, like, what's your best route in there? Is it a degree, or is it doing something in yourself and going out there and exploring, starting your own thing? And I think my biggest challenge of doing the marketing course at the time was I didn't necessarily find it that useful, in that I wasn't able to apply it. So it was all very good theoretically, but now doing like a mini MBA now is so much more useful, because you get the context and for the job you're currently in. So I found, whilst it was interesting, it was very theoretical and hard to actually apply it meaningfully at the time. So I think it was probably useful to have in the background, but I would question, like, would you be better off giving people on a marketing or business degree half of their feedback to put into a business that they're running at the same time? Mm-hmm. The uni then takes half the profit and you get half back, and you then get the kind of the counsel of the people there from a finance, the law perspective at the uni to kind of coach people through that, rather than pure theory, which potentially isn't that useful. But the great part of what I enjoyed and why I look back was the business. The final year was a business plan, so we had to put a business plan together, present it to VCs, and that was the bit that I really loved. It was about creating a concept, building out like a business plan, selling that in. And I thought that was the bit that I loved, and I'd like to see more of that. I think in the way that the degree's set up. I think it'd be great to get marketing degrees as aspirational as a classic. So when people come out with the marketing degree and they're like, I've got a first in marketing, they're like, well, that is seen as the same level as a first in economics. But I think you need to shift and change the way those degrees are positioned and seen within the market, probably, for that to happen. But yeah, so a few perspectives on that, really.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is School of Marketing and all that. Say no more. But what's interesting, if I go now, flip back to Moju, is you Danone, Heineken, big scale, massive organisations, small cog in a big wheel, potentially, and now you've gone to a much smaller business, looking to scale. Yeah. So, big adjustment in terms of the way you go about it, your MO.
Yeah, definitely. I think for anyone that's worked in a larger organisation, you are, whatever anyone says, you are a sort of a small cog in a large wheel ultimately, and you can impact things, but it's a lot slower and it's a lot harder. And ultimately, you're kind of very much led by the structure and the processes of that organisation, whether that's filling in a briefing template or whatever. In a small organisation, none of that exists. You've got to create the processes and the structure. You've got to go back to first principles and build everything from scratch. You've got to build the culture. You've got to build the team and the people. It is chalk and cheese ultimately, but it's, for me, certainly more rewarding, gives me way more energy, and yeah, I love the idea of first principles, because every category and every brand is different. It has its own challenges and its own problems. And it's great to have all the theory and the frameworks, but you've got to mix that with your curiosity around the consumer and about what's going on in the market, and apply those together. So I think, definitely very different, and they will suit different people. But for me, more energizing, motivating for sure within a smaller business. Definitely has its downsides, like cash constraints. But then that's also you can talk about beautiful constraints, and actually that's quite a fun, motivating part as well. So, not sure if that necessarily answers your question, Mark, but definitely hugely different challenges. And obviously you don't get the kind of the functional training that you'd get in a bigger organisation as well. So I'd always encourage people to try and get experience in both, because I think they bring different benefits. But ultimately for me, working in a smaller scale up environment, it suits my style, my energy, and what I love doing the most.
John, I'm gonna put you on the spot for a second here, because I think it quite important really. In that you've been at Moju a number of years now, and from the way you've described the journey and some of the key activations that you've been able to put into the organization, I think you've got a point of view where if you were going to do it all again, and you were perhaps going on to the next big thing, if it ever came, what would be some of the first things that you would think about when trying to almost replicate the magic of what's happened at Moju again?
That is a good question. So I'd say the three things would be curiosity, ultimately, that like getting close to the consumer, not being led by the consumer, but really understanding the consumer and being really curious around them. Like Moju learned from going out on the ground and sampling at festivals and not necessarily having the perfect brand at that point, but understanding and learning like what is it about this product, what is it about this category that's really got the potential. So yeah, and going out into coffee shops and talking to people, I think that's what was really important. And then when I joined, we spent quite a lot of time really understanding about that daily ritual, morning ritual, and how can we tap into that, is that potential. And so I think it's that curiosity, I think, that is so important, because if you say, like, I think 1% each day obviously takes you to a certain sort of path. If you're going in the wrong 1% each day, you're going a very, very wrong path, and I've seen that happen. So I think it's that calibration is really important, so you're going on the right path. So I'd say that would be kind of the number one thing. I think the other one is, the playing set is speak to as many people as possible within your network, and when you're kind of starting up, you don't necessarily have the budgets, but if you've got a really good network of people and you've got really good resources, someone has always done something or tried something before, and you can fail fast, and sure, you can do that, but actually building that network of people who can give their thoughts or share their learnings or examples, I think is really powerful. And I think we've really lent on that, and hopefully I'd like to think that people think we've really been quite generous with our time and others as well, because a lot of people are on that startup scale-up journey, and that we're all a bit like making it up as we go along. So I think that's been really, really kind of important too. And then the third thing I would say is, again, what we've learned is in terms of like deploying investment and using that in a way that you don't overcommit, and you learn in the right way, so that you can test, learn, iterate, invest more, test, learn, iterate, and follow that, rather than go big bangs straight out the door and then potentially then be like, put yourself in a difficult position later. So yeah, a couple of things that I think I would carry forward as principles for anywhere. And then obviously, as you touched on, that first principles approach, like always going back to not assuming that because someone's done it this way before that it's the right way. And I think that's guided everything we've done for the brand so far. And then one thing I think we've also done well, sorry, I'm rattling a few.
Go ahead.
Is, and I think it plays into first principles, but what we've done really well at Mojo is we've the danger of our category is that we can be seen as it could have been very easy that we could have looked at like being a new sort of wellness product that are only for people that sort of live in West London and go to health food shops. And we've been very conscious that to make this a mainstream brand, we've got to take a very different mindset and positioning on that. And I think that's been really important for us. So feeling like a brand that anyone could pick up and enjoy as being really critical. And I think that is, again, something I would take forward is how can this brand in the future scale beyond just that early adopter audience? Because I think most food and beverage brands will probably just get stuck at that point. So I'd always be looking for that brand that has the ability to transcend that early adopter audience and not kind of fall into the trap of being another product which is only for people that have got certain levels of money, disposable income, and can break beyond that. I think that's been very, very important for us from the beginning. So yeah, that'd be another one too.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, there's some really clear thinking. You really know your category, you really know your customer, you really know your role, you really know the arc of the brand development journey. So you are a brand leader, but you're also a people leader. So I'm going to jump to that and tell me a bit about Jon as leader.
You should ask my team, definitely. So I'd say it's a bit of a cliche, but like head in the clouds, feet on the ground is the way I like to sort of think. So I love ambition, I love kind of big ideas, but ultimately I've seen them before, but not necessarily seen them come to life. So I'm a big part of me is about big ideas, big ambition, but being quite pragmatic and making those happen and bringing and helping the team understand how we can bring those to life. And I think that's what's really tries to be really motivating for the team, and that we can make stuff happen, and we're going to push each other and back each other to do that. So I'd say that's kind of one of my sort of principles. I'd say the other one would be, and it's a bit of maybe a millennial cliche, but is the empathy point. I think probably a lot of people growing up with not had a great deal of empathy through their journey, and I felt that actually that's really benefited me, and something I try to show my team and really get to know and understand them, what motivates them, what are their strengths, what are their skills, how can we support them. So I'd say definitely on that side of things, like high empathy and high end sort of empowerment and trust. Those would be my two. I could go on a bit more, but those would be the two I'd say that I would pragmatically optimistic and high empathy would be the two.
Head in the clouds, feet on the ground, and pragmatically optimistic. I love it. I love that. It's interesting because you really come across as the big ideas guy, and even some of the rhetoric that you use to describe the product is fascinating. So waking up from the dead, fire up your day in a healthy way, wake, shake, boom. It feels like you and yourself have been able to package up the essence of both the behavior you're trying to engender, as well as what the sort of, the product is in its purest form. And you talked a little bit more early on about the cult that almost that it can engender. Although interestingly, in the same token, the need to go beyond that and the need to be mainstream. And so it feels interesting how sort of it describes early adopter, but then going beyond. When you were describing it, it felt a little bit liquid death to me. I don't know why. Have you had any inspiration from that, or anything that you've taken away from other categories that you think you've used to try and bolster your own as you built and scaled?
Yeah, I mean, Liquid Death are definitely a good inspiration in terms of attention. They do a great job of that. I'd say we're not them, but they definitely inspire us in terms of how to get attention for sure. And Mike's obviously a real pioneer of that. So yeah, we're all big fans of them. In terms of other brands that have inspired us, I'd say within the category we'd look to sort of brands like a Vita Coco, who are probably the only brand in sort of the last sort of 20, 30 or maybe 20 years that have cut through at scale with a sort of functional health sort of proposition within juice. So they would be one. But yeah, we look to other insurgent brands from the last 20 years, like Propercorn, who have done an amazing job to build a category and an identity. But then we'll be inspired by sort of behemoth brands as well that we all love, like KFC. I mean, the kind of from a comms and advertising perspective, absolutely in terms of understanding fan truths and bringing those to life at scale. There's some bigger sort of wider brands that will also inspire us too. Not in the way that they kind of engage people, but yeah, I'd say within sort of insurgent brands, we definitely look to those kind of couple of brands I've already mentioned, but there are plenty more. I would actually say we look more to the US for sure. I think the US obviously is from when I was younger, the UK used to be slightly ahead. I think the US is probably 5-6 years ahead of us on a lot of stuff. Wow. And not everything in the US will work over here because they can scale a niche over there. We can't scale a niche over here because we don't have the population size. But brands like Olipop, which have done an amazing job in terms of building a functional health proposition that's gone mainstream alongside a Liquid Death, which are obviously doing something similar in terms of the health space. But yeah, we would definitely look, I'd say, more to the US for inspiration in terms of how we build the sort of next generation of brands. And we're actually going over to New York in a couple of weeks, so get more inspiration over there then. But definitely, more to the US, I'd say, than the UK at the moment.
Love the word insurgency. I just realise it's got the urgency within it, but there's just something really big about that. I want to rewind a little bit. IPA Grand Prix. Direct line came really, really close. So it's sort of maybe unfulfilled ambition, or that's a very egotistical thing to say. But tell us about how you get, because it's sort of marketers' dreams. IPAs, it's properly about effectiveness. So tell us a bit more about the story there.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't profess to be the only component of that success, and I definitely came in the sort of second half of that journey. So all credit to the team that were very much at the early stages of that journey, because it was a long journey. So Foster's were, as a brand at the time, I think when the campaign kicked off, it's the Good Call campaign, which is very famous. So Brad and Dan in the hut with people from the UK would call them for advice. Hugely entertaining brand world they'd created, and very, very famous campaign for anyone that can remember it. And it was all about embodying the no worries attitude, because the beer was ultimately easy drinking, refreshing, and no worries beer. So it was embodying that kind of Australian no worries attitude. And the journey on that was all about carving out a distinctive emotional positioning for the brand that was very memorable. And that was a journey where the first ad maybe wasn't that great, but then they got better and better as it went on and became more famous, and very high levels of TV spend, but very engaging campaign that then rolled into comedy. So sponsored Channel 4, Channel 4 again, Channel 4 sponsorship, Channel 4 comedy, Friday nights, and again Foster's rooting themselves in that no worries attitude linked to comedy and lightheartedness and refreshment, kind of brand building investment in emotional campaigns. And that ultimately led to ROI on that campaign was over £30 per pound spent. So really effective, very famous campaign, and one that a lot of people remember very favourably. Not sure it's necessarily relevant to today's consumer because things have changed quite a lot in terms of humour, but and a great testament to the impact of humour in advertising, right? Because they were laugh out loud funny and people would look forward to watching them. So that was that. I mean, Adam and Eve, credit to them, did a phenomenal job on that. That was an incredible piece of insight into the UK consumer around people when they're 18 and 19 and they're kind of a little bit lost with the world. Not really sure what their path is, and tapping into that Aussie no worries mindset is very powerful and made them feel more confident and made them feel like they're making the right choice if they're having a light refreshing beer. Obviously the category's changed quite a lot since then with the insurgence of craft and premium beer, but at the time it was a fight for who was the leading mainstream beer, and Foster's won that ultimately over that period of time. So that's a bit of a whistle stop tour at Mark, but
hey,
I'll give you some more if there's more detail behind it.
Congrats to everybody involved, and what a phenomenal achievement, and one of those career-defining moments, I'm sure, that are probably memorable and you look back on, in that way. You've spun the wheel a few times when it comes to brand building, and I find that really interesting, and your perspectives and the way that you structure your thinking about how you go about building brands is truly impressive. I just wonder, and in fact, it takes me to a point maybe where I'm sort of thinking about that graphic that Dr. Grace Kite and Tom Roach put together, where there is a point at which, you move from a product-led approach, and then you get to a point, or you get to a plateau, as they call it, and then you need to kind of go into sort of, be able to build your audiences in slightly different ways. Yeah. And I just wonder, at Moju, did you feel that acutely? Did you feel there was a moment in time, or did it evolve slightly differently? And as part of that, love to just get your take more broadly on how would you go about building brands?
Yeah, I know exactly the graphic you're talking about, actually, Richie. So I think we give ourselves milestones on the brand, and you might call it saturation points on certain things that then unlock the next level. So think about like a computer game or a video game. So the big one for us, I think for any brand starting out, is there's absolutely no point in investing behind product advertising or brand building until you've actually got distribution of the product. And I know that sounds stupid, but actually it's not always thought about. If you're only in 500 stores, you can only drive rate of sale in 500 stores. If you're in 10,000 stores, you can drive rate of sale in 10,000 stores. The impact is quite different on your business. So I think we've been very careful about, we didn't do huge mass sampling. We've sampled 2 million consumers over the last 3 or 4 years. We didn't do that until we were in Co-op, because Co-op gave us access to 2,000 stores around the UK. Otherwise, we'd be sampling and people couldn't buy the product. So that was, it sounds obvious, but actually that's the way that we sort of unlocked that investment, I'd say, in the brand. And then when it came to sort of bigger above-the-line campaigns, so posters, for example, and doing Channel 4, it was about when is sampling started to saturate? When are we seeing the rate of sale impacts of sampling start to tail off a little bit and plateau? So we would, our equivalent of performance marketing, I'd say, has been sampling, because you can get the direct response impacts. You can look at the store sales and see what the uplift was. And once you've done it 3 times, you start to see that tail off. You're probably hitting saturation point. So we would say our performance marketing in real life is sampling. We obviously do some digital display performance marketing as well for D2C, but I'd say that's been our biggest investment. So yeah, I'd say the unlock there was distribution, but also to sampling. Then the unlock to then doing bigger above the line was when do we start to hit saturation point on rate of sale uplift from sampling, and then unlock that, and then it's when do we hit saturation point around just doing stuff in cities, and then start to then build out more broader advertising through Channel 4. So that's the way that we've looked at it. And then like, what have we learned from that? And we've learned things like some cities and some regions have bigger impacts in sampling uplift, some less so. So we've then focused our investment in those cities more than other cities. For example, with Channel 4, we've learned some really interesting stuff which we're going to take into next year or into the year coming up in terms of how we approach the next phase of that. How do we get incremental penetration, because sponsorship taps out at a certain point? How do we build some of the additional messaging in that you can't build in through sponsorship? So yeah, we were saturated on some of the messages we could put out there, so we want to unlock those. So yeah, I'd say it's very much about staging and then understanding what you want to learn at each stage and then building off of that. So keeping it quite like a modular approach has been really key for us, and that's definitely like something I would take forward. It's like, what do we want to invest and learn at this stage that allows us to then make the bets for the next stage, and then allows us to, and I think Mark talks about it, leaps. We'd call it leaps. So what's the leap we're going to take and what we're going to learn from it? And if we don't know what we're going to learn from it, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Leaps, love it. It's very, very, I mean, it's very logical, structured, rational. But I mean, that's the nature of the beast. These, building brands, it's like, it's building a machine in many regards. Now then, this show is all about getting amazing people on who achieve incredible things and getting them tips and advice and hints and so on. But it's also to recognise the fact that nothing's ever perfect. So, John, I'm going to ask you to think about, what are some of the times when it hasn't been perfect, and how have you used that as springboards? So some of the learnings from the pivot moments.
Yeah, I'd say challenges-wise, I'd say one of the biggest ones I've probably myself personally, should I talk to, or just general business ones? I've got a few. So I'd say the personal one for me would be around where I get my energy from and sort of my behavioural sort of style. And I think if people have done things like insights profiles or disc profiles, they'll know like what colour they are and what that means about how they work. And I definitely learned that my energy is probably best not suited to bigger organisations. So I found myself at a point where in bigger organisations, I really enjoyed it, but ultimately I felt I wasn't probably doing my best work. And it was probably because my energy was going towards stakeholder management, towards the politics, towards the wrong things really, which don't suit me, not towards the problem solving, the analysis, the kind of big ideas side. So for me, it was about understanding where my energies were and what place they would be best suited. But also like finding your tribe as well. And you are the sum of what the people you spend the most time with. And they were great people, the companies I work with, but were they quite the right people that got the best out of me? Maybe not. So basically on my journey, I've been trying to find my way in that path to like, what's the right culture and what are the right people that can get the best out of me, and what's the environment. So I'd say that was a big challenge, because I probably lost a little bit of faith with the industry at some points in that, because I felt like maybe it wasn't for me, but actually it was potentially I just wasn't necessarily in exactly the right company. I'm proud of a lot of the stuff that I did in those previous companies, but just didn't feel like it was the best work. And then I'd say the biggest challenge in terms of what I would recall as like that was a low moment would definitely be things like link tests. So if anyone's done produced ads and gone through link testing and failed, and then not had an ad made, or even had an ad made that hasn't run, that's I know that advertising is only 5% of the time we spend, but it's probably 80% of the money we spend. So that's that would be, I'd say, one thing that stuck with me, and I'd say has led me to become a better marketer, because I'd say a lot of the work not necessarily was directly related to me, but I was part of the project, would be the strategy or the brief probably wasn't actually the right in the first place. There wasn't a consumer insight. It probably was just, actually, we just want to make this brand famous, but that wasn't a brief, but that often would have been the brief at some point. So I think I saw a quote about something saying like fame or kind of creativity, it shouldn't be brave, because if it's brave, you're basically gambling. Like you actually would, the way you execute it should be brave, but if the brief's right, then the work should be great, and it shouldn't be a risk, and it shouldn't be guessing. So I think that was a big part of it, and we've been really at Moju. We've been the effort we've put into the brief and the strategy behind the brief, I'd say, is that we don't leave any sort of stone unturned, and we're really clear what it is we're trying to achieve with what we're doing. So the clarity of a tight brief, or the freedom of a tight brief, we sort of like to talk about. So I'd say it's been the biggest learning on that. And it would easy to blame link testing and all that sort of stuff. But what I've learned is actually like be really clear on what it is you want to achieve, and you will achieve that if you give the right brief and you evaluate the responses correctly. So, and I think part of that also comes down when you're in a big company. Yes, there's quite a bit of money flying about, so I don't think there's as much care or attention. In a smaller business, actually every pound you spend is you got to treat it like your own. You should anywhere, but ultimately you've got to treat it like your own. And that level of extra care and attention that gets put in, I think, is really valuable, and I think can definitely be carried through to sort of larger organisations in terms of that rigour. So yeah, I'd say that was a really good, powerful learning, but is definitely for the better. A good mistake to have made.
Yeah, I bet it's held you in great stead. And John, I love the previous one you talked on a personal level, just in and around, really understanding where you fit, finding your tribe, the culture and people that you want to be around. And I bet a lot of people listening in at different moments in their careers have genuinely lost faith in what they're doing. And it's only when you truly are in sync, I think, with the people in and around you and with the mission that you're driving towards, that you can genuinely get a great amount of satisfaction and get the most out of work and work get the most out of you, quite frankly. John, it's been a wonderful experience to sit with you and hear you today talk about so many great things from our industry. And I get the pleasure of being able to summarize just a few to try and help do you justice. I love the brand that you're creating. It feels so authentic, but doing so in a way that's really challenging some of the norms that we've had for so long around, the morning routines and occasions. Having something as healthy alternatives that gives you the same kicks, if not more, to start your day and energize you with some real benefits feels like a wonderful mission to be on. And I can sense that through and through, and the way you talk about it, and it comes across in spades. But what I think the sweet spot has been is the mission of the product, but actually, your ability to really drive through your expertise from the marketing space to then be able to it comes together. Even from the get-go, right? You're talking about the product benefit, and you never forget your first ginger shot. It lets you wake up from the dead. How do you think about making this mainstream and not just staying as a potential cult sort of brand, as it were? But interestingly, starting from insight. And, you talked about in the early days going through to coffee shops, for instance. You talked about the way that you need curiosity to be able to kind of get really to your consumer and understand what those morning routines are in order to execute on some of the other things that you described. And you're in a unique position because clearly it's not just about market share, but it's also about category building. And so you're a front runner when it comes to trying to educate people in and around the product proposition and why it's perhaps an alternative, a better alternative to some of the other ways in which we spend our mornings trying to get up and get in shape for the day. I love the thought that you had around sampling, and I'm not sure to what extent marketers use it fully in their arsenal. But I do think that there's something really magical in that because, of course, if the product's good, sort of, like you say, when people taste it, experience it, they kind of get it. And that's the quickest way for somebody to get it. And I really like that. Backed up by a bit of science, as you described, when you talked about working with sports teams, you've done your own studies. And I think that credibility factor as well, with the brand essence, with the sort of the quick turn of phrases, the product shot, as it were, the wake, shake, boom sort of stuff going on as well, gives it credibility and science backed in. You even have care packages. I love that. Care package, a product care package for the morning. But there we are. So there's some unique creativity that goes on there. You talked a lot about your own inspiration to want to get into the industry, drawing Nike shoes, for instance, going to young enterprise. And the alternative model of university that you described, I think, is fairly groundbreaking. The thought that you can, universities too can team up with people who are there and actually act as a support mechanism to create economic value for both parties sounds like a super sharp way forward for institutions. I'm not sure how much thought you gave it, but it does sound quite revolutionary and will probably solve quite a few problems, both from an education perspective as well as a university business model that is often quite broken. I think when we talked about how and you would think about your, to go on and do it again, curiosity, speak to as many people as possible, deploying investment in the right way, iterating in that sense, going back to first principles, and adopting a different mindset around the whole endeavor to go beyond just the early adopters. All of those key points will help people in really good stead to think about their own marketing efforts as well. A lot of inspiration from a lot of brands out there, predominantly the US, Vita Coco, Proper Corn, KFC, clearly this side of the pond. But actually, when you're thinking about being inspired, you do turn more to the other side to get where people are coming from. And yeah, so I think, there's just so much to pick at. You talked about the different phases of brand building as well. So distribution first, something often people forget. The role of sampling, broader based advertising. And then even today, you're at a stage where you're thinking about the next steps. And how do you get additional messaging in a broader capacity in order to extend the message beyond? So we've obviously then finished off on the wonderful sort of thinking around that you are really in a good place and you've sort of found your fit. And I think that's lovely to hear, quite frankly, because I think, we were on the academy 8 years ago, and I think at that point we were all trying to find our place. And it's lovely to think that we've kind of come a bit full circle and we're both in the places that we need to be. So John, thank you. It's just been a wonderful time. And I'm sure a lot of people in the community will get a lot of benefit from this talk. So thank you.
Thanks, Rishi. Yeah, thanks, Mark, as well. Yeah, it's been fun.